Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Playbook for Leaders and Entrepreneurs. Today, we have a very inspirational guest whose journey will surely inspire you today. He's a business growth strategist where he helps entrepreneurs grow their business by helping them attract the right clients. He's also an exceptional public speaker where I had the honor to listen to him at an impromptu public speaking competition where Lewis was competing at a district level. Without any further delay, I'm very excited to welcome Lewis Berrisford. Lewis, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sid. I'm happy to be here with you, and I'm looking forward to sharing some tips with your listeners.
Thank you, Lewis. So let's start off. So please could you give us more insights into your business and personal life so our listeners can get to know you a little bit more?
What I do is that I help small to medium sized businesses attract their ideal clients and double their income. For example, I had a young lady, she wanted to start up a business and she was very confused, not sure what to do. She consulted with me. We sat down and we discussed what it is she wanted to do, where she was, where she wants to get to. And I help her to figure it. I help her to clarify, which is one of the things I do, help people to clarify where they want to go. Because if people don't know where they want to go, that is usually one of the biggest challenges that some business owners have, lack of clarity. So I help with the clarity of the vision. So after I helped her clarify her vision. She went out, she hired a room, and she started marketing. She wanted to work with young people to teach them dancing. And she had a group called Motivate West Yorkshire, which was all about motivating people, getting them energized, getting them excited about life. It was about uplifting people, and she had been stuck on that for a number of years. And after we had about 3 sessions, she was freed and she was ready to run with her business. It was amazing. I've never seen somebody took action that quickly. It was amazing.
Right. And what about your personal life? How did you get into business, being a business strategist?
Well, that was an interesting journey because I grew up in the Caribbean and I grew up as a
Uh-huh.
farmer, which
Okay.
meant I used to go with my grandmother to the market every week to sell our products. So as a result of going to the market, I learned a lot about entrepreneurship. And if you grow up in some countries in the world, you have to fend for yourself. You have to make a living. You don't go on the dole. You don't get unemployment benefits. Everybody has to work. So entrepreneurship and farming and other forms of earning an income is what people have to do to make it in life. So I grew up as part of that culture. I had my own pig farm. I used to rear pigs and sell them. I was also doing some farming, planting yams, tanyas, dashing, going to the market, selling French cashew. It was an exciting time to be.
Right. So all your life you've been an entrepreneur. That's exciting. So tell us about your journey from the Caribbean to the UK. How was that like?
Well, that was interesting because I came to the UK as a missionary. When I was back
Okay.
home in Grenada, I got involved with the church. It was an African church, and people normally go on pilgrimage. You travel the world and you share the gospel with other people. So I became part of that. I came to the UK as a missionary. Then I went to Africa to learn the system, see how they do the business. So then when I come back here and go to other places, then I would set up branches of the church and spread the gospel. So that was how it happened for me.
Nice.
Mm.
So what are some key lessons you have learned from your grandmother that still guide your decisions today?
Well, one of the key lessons that still guide me today is the whole idea of wisdom. My grandmother brought me up on a biblical character because Solomon, she took all her knowledge from Solomon. They said Solomon was one of the wisest men in the world,
Wait,
and
tell us about Solomon. Who is it? Who is it
he
in
was
general?
he's a biblical character, so he was one of the kings in the Bible, and
Okay.
he was also very wealthy. There is a story about Solomon where two ladies, were in hospital and they both had a child. One slept on the baby and the baby died. So they went to King Solomon and said, "We need a solution. Whose baby is it?" So the woman whose baby it wasn't, so Solomon proposed, what we could do, we could split the baby down in half. You get half of the baby, and the other woman got the other half. I mean, naturally, you know what would happen if that was the case.
Yeah, yeah.
So the woman whose baby it wasn't was adamant that Solomon should split the baby in two and they both get half each. The other lady, who was the real mother, she pleaded with Solomon and said, if that was the case, just give her the baby. Then Solomon came to the realization whose baby it was. So Solomon was seen as really wise person. And my grandmother, they didn't have formal schooling, so they had what I call street wisdom that empowered them to do everything that they did. And one of the things she taught me was that we go to university to get knowledge, but they actually had that knowledge because that's what she calls being a scientist. And for her, being a scientist is living by what you know. So your knowledge gives you the ability to do things. And she had pretty much everything she wanted in life. She was kind, gentle, and supportive. So all of my knowledge, my understanding about how to listen to people, how to engage with people, came from observing her, listening to what she was telling me when I was growing up.
Very nice. And what did your family business teach you about entrepreneurship and business growth?
Well, there wasn't any formal education, but you learn as you go along. I mean, everything was based on the seasons. So
Okay.
which means preparation was a big part of what we do. So you need to know when to prepare, when to get ready. So for example, let's say we're planting yams, right?
Okay.
Around September, December would be the planting time, and then about June, July would be the harvest time. But the yam plant, when it is ready for planting, they start to sprout eyes, what we call eyes. You see a little white bird start shooting. So you know it's time for planting. Then you have to prepare the soil. Then you have to, cultivate it. You plant, you nurture, you get rid of the weeds. So everything it's around planning and knowing, because if you don't fertilize at the right time, then the crops wouldn't be able to nurture and grow. Again, you have to know when to harvest because then the rainy season starts coming in. So it's a series of understanding the different elements and how they combine together, and you need to operate within that. So knowing the seasons was really key.
Right. And what about the growth strategies? Any key growth strategies that you learned from your family business that you still apply with your clients, for example?
Well, the key growth strategies was based on the idea of clarity, understanding what it is people need. Because if you don't know what you need or where you're going, you wouldn't even know when you get there. So that was one of the key growth strategies. Even working with people now, one of the biggest problems they have is a lack of clarity. So after I help them to clarify what it is they need, then the marketing and the sales and everything else come on board. And
Nice.
again,
Let's. Mhm.
having to go to the market every week, then I had to speak to people. So I developed my communication skills. The people we're selling to, I had to negotiate with them. So I also developed my negotiation skills. And sometimes people do a lot of trading or bartering. So you say, this is 20 pounds, and they say, no, maybe 18 pounds or 10 pounds even. And you have to learn to manage. Yeah.
Nice. And you also mentioned a lot of the 3C process in your business strategy. So, what is the 3C process and how can businesses effectively implement it for growth?
Okay, the three C, the first C is about clarity. So clarity of vision, clarity of purpose, because as I say already, without clarity, one doesn't quite know where one is going. And even if you get there, you wouldn't know when you arrive there. So first there is the clarity. And then once you get the clarity, then you need to connect. But first of all, it's about connecting with oneself. It's about understanding oneself, your skills, what you have to offer. And then you're able to connect with other people to support them. And once you clarify, you connect, then you start to communicate because you have a message. You're clear about what you want to communicate to people. So now you start communicating, you choose the appropriate channels to communicate with people. So that's what the three C's are all about. And they're very fundamental to running a successful business. You probably know marketing. Again, a lot of marketing and sales is about communicating, getting your message to the right people at the right time, at the right place. But if you don't have clarity on what it is you want to offer, if you don't know what your offering is, then you have nothing to offer the market. You also need to know how what you offer benefit the people. How would their lives be different as a result of working with you? So the three C's are the system that helps to create the force that moves everything.
Right. Interesting. And maybe could you share a real life example on how you implemented the 3C for our listeners?
Okay, one real example is I was working with a young lady called Saba. She came to me with, I knew her for a while and she had been struggling with getting the business set up. So I worked with her, help her to clarify her assets, build the asset up, identify the target markets, and communicate with them. And
Mm.
so after we were able to do that, she began, her confidence really increased. And she was looking forward to doing more business, helping more people, supporting more people. Because before that, she didn't feel ready. So working with her, give her that sense of clarity, and with clarity comes certainty, and with certainty comes confidence, and with confidence comes action.
Nice. And where do you learn about business strategy from? Like, do you recommend any books or website that which you use to learn about it?
Well, I learned by working with people practically. So I would start with my grandmother, and that's where I learned most of it. But outside of that, I did an MSc in marketing and management. So I learned a lot about marketing, strategy, business growth, and development. But I also work with some of the international marketers, people like Don Kennedy, people like Jay Abrahams, people like Joel Bauer. I'm part of a group with Succeed from the Start, which is run by Angela Roth. So these are some of the people I've worked with, and they're very practical. I also was part of Andy Harrington's crowd as well. You know, he is a public speaker and he supports people to, develop their business through public speaking. In addition to that, I'm also a member of Toastmasters, so I'm learning, my speaking skills from there as well. So I mean, I do read a lot because I'm a senior lecturer in business management. So you can imagine I'm always researching, reading, and writing.
Nice. And you mentioned you're a business lecturer as well. So is there any like new theories or concepts has come in with AI and strategy that you could share with our listeners that's helping us maybe implement the strategy in a better way?
Well, the key thing about all the AI and new technology is about adaptability because the fundamentals are the same. We need to communicate with people. We need to speak with people. We do business with people. So key skills like leadership, listening, influence, persuasion, these remain key. But we need to learn to adapt to the technology. So just having the technology without understanding what
Mhm.
moves the technology, it's It's no help, it's not very helpful. So I have friends and they would say, okay, they go to GPT chat, right? But if
Yeah.
they don't understand what a clear message is, you see, what the steps are to raise awareness when you're doing marketing, the GPT chat doesn't give you the answer. So you still need the hardcore knowledge to make those things work. So it's interesting, but I think, listening to people, listening to customers and understanding them, having a conversation with
Mm.
them to understand their needs would be the
Yeah.
things that would help one more. I mean, the technology makes it easier to leverage certain aspects of the business, but it doesn't necessarily replace everything else that you need to make the business function effectively.
So, what are the most critical skills needed to build long-term relationship with clients? Because you work with a lot of clients, Lewis. I'm interested to know how can we build that long-term relationship with them.
Let me give you an example. At the moment, I'm working with a group of managers, potential leaders, and business owners, right? They're all international and they don't know each other. I asked them to do a presentation for me, and they were all very nervous because they feel they don't have the skills, they don't know what to say, they're not sure how to prepare. So I have been preparing them, getting them ready for the big day when they do the presentation. And as we go through the presentation, I do it in such a way that they draw on their internal strength, their internal power. So they're discovering things about themselves that they didn't know. Interestingly, after I ran the first session with them, I got everybody to come up and say something about themselves so they get to know each other. I was amazed by the end. People were exchanging telephone numbers, exchanging emails because they were together for about 6 weeks prior and nobody made a move to get to know each other. But after I did that activity with them and they get to understand the skills the other person has, what the other person brings, they were really ready to connect with each other. And I think relationship comes out of a certain kind of knowledge, knowing who the person is, what they stand for, what their value is. And before I did that activity with them, they weren't sure about that. So they realized they could actually trust the person because they now knew more about the person than they've previously thought.
Yeah, actually, tell me more about this. So, 6 weeks before, the clients weren't interacting that much, but after 6 weeks, when you did that activity, they started interacting more. So, what was the thing that more specifically you could tell us about? So, I know they share about themselves more. So, what else could you
I
could
think
share?
what was coming out from all of this was they were understanding they have skills that they didn't know that they have. So one of
Right.
the things I do, I call myself a knowledge archaeologist. So I help people to realize the skills, the asset that they have, but don't realize. And so when they realize the assets that they had that they didn't know about, they were able to see how they could connect with other people. In other words, the need for doing joint ventures became apparent because they were saying, I have this set of skills and I know that, but I need the AI sets of skill and this person has that. So now they started to trade skills and interact with each other based on what they needed once they understood what the other people offered. But before that, they had no clue what each other were capable of. So that's one of the things I like to do with people, help them to build the relationship.
Yeah, quite interesting like that. So, Lewis, you've also written a book on business strategy for next generation. So, please could you tell us what does Windrush teaches us about business strategy for the next generation, and what is Windrush, by the way, as well?
Well, I have this book here. I don't know if you could see, right?
Yes, we can kind of see it now. Yeah.
Yeah. So it all came out of my work being a community development worker because I used to work in the community. I support community leadership, community engagement, and I organize a range of activities to bring communities together, to unite people. And that's my way of giving back. So it was the sixth, when was it? 2018, I think it was. And I did a joint venture with a number of people from a group called MOB, Marshfield, Odsall, and Bankfoot Enterprise. And they were looking to celebrate Windrush. What had happened in about 1948, about 400 plus people came from the Caribbean on a vessel called the Windrush. So that was the first wave of mass migration after the World War. I mean, people have been coming from the Commonwealth to the UK, forever. But that moment marked what is called the beginning of Windrush. So these were the people who came after the war to build the country, to build the NHS, to work on the rails. Did you know that Winston Churchill and Enoch Powell went to Jamaica to recruit people to come to the UK to work? And yet, and yet, Enoch Powell turned against the people and he gave a famous speech called The Rivers of Blood. He was based in Birmingham and it was all about racial tension. So it's quite interesting to see how British senior people went to the Caribbean to recruit. And the moment people came and started to expand, they wanted to kick them out. So it's quite interesting. But the Windrush is a rather controversial topic because when Theresa May became prime minister or just before that, I think they destroy a lot of the documents that people from the Caribbean and the Commonwealth came with. So, for example, if you were a young boy at the moment, you perhaps came on your mother's passport. So the Home Office actually destroyed the documents, and with destroying the documents, people couldn't prove that they belong. So they started to deport people back to the Commonwealth countries where they come from. People who had been here for years and established in jobs, they were just sending them back home. But we're not focusing on the negative impact of Windrush because we understand the Windrush as a time to celebrate, to look at the achievements of African Caribbean people, which was what the book was about.
Okay.
So I organized a conference to understand how people from the Windrush generation contributed to the business side of the UK. Because I think even Theresa May, one of the former prime ministers, she was saying that we should all enjoy the wealth of the nation. And so I wanted to see how people from the Caribbean, people from Africa were enjoying the wealth of the nation. And the best way to look at that was for me through business, looking at the contribution of those people who are running businesses because they would provide employment for people, and if they're providing employment, then it means that there would be less people destitute. If we think about racial discrimination, we'd say, well, people employing our people. So, in that sense, we wanted to understand how businesses or black businesses contribute to that. What were some of the challenges that they were facing? And I had business owners share some of the challenges that they were facing and what strategies they thought were useful for the next generation of younger people to engage more in business.
Do you mind sharing some of those strategies with us to overcome any challenges?
Well, one of the strategies we focused on, or the book focused on, was clarity was one of those areas, but
Yeah.
it was also looking at how people value their asset. So what assets people have and how you value that. So at one level, we would look at people's family, their financial resources, their networks. So that would have been one strategy. The book also looked at aspects of marketing. how you market your service. It was also about strategy. How do you put the right strategies in place to ensure sustainability? And strategy was about where are you now and where do you want to get to and how do you get there? So these were some of the lessons. It's an ongoing piece of work, and I'm continuing with the work through my academic portfolio, but I'm also part of the African Business Association, a group that was started in Bradford about almost 2 years now. And our aim is to empower people of African descent to get more involved with businesses. So we run a series of networks to connect different people. We run sessions on finance and giving people a space to really develop their thinking and their ideas. So that's the work I continue to do as part of the Windrush. But we see the Windrush as a landmark in British history.
Quite fascinating, Lewis. Thank you for sharing. And another question on that. So, from the conference, could you share maybe uh, a story of a business owner overcoming challenges that might inspire an entrepreneur who's going through a challenge at the minute? Anything you could share on that, if you
Well,
remember?
there is one colleague of mine, and he runs a printing business. And he would, when he tells the story, and he shared the story with us many times, he said he mortgaged his house, he bought a building, and he lived in the building. The building was unfurbished. He had to renovate it and he had to build it up. So he went through that for a number of years until the business became really successful and flourishing now. And he's probably the number one African Caribbean person in the area that produce all kinds of signage, marketing posters for people. So it took him a while to build it up, but yes, he got there in the end.
The entrepreneurial struggle is real for sure. Um,
It is real, and I think people have to be prepared for some challenges as well. And I think it's out of the challenges, one grows. So it's not a bad thing altogether. And again, we need to be creative. We need to find solutions to problems that we have and other people need solution to.
Mhm. And in when you're consulting your clients, let's say your client faces a challenge. So how do you know when to pivot a strategy or when to persevere with the strategy?
It depends on what the challenge is. So I had one business owner who consulted with me because they were in the leisure industry, but they weren't doing particularly well. And one reason they weren't doing well is because they weren't sure who their target was. So at one point they were focusing on schools, at one point they were focusing on executives. So they were all over the place. So when they came to me, they wanted to know, Louis, who should we really focus on? What should our target be? So based on what they suggest to me, what they see the challenge was, and based on the research that I've done, I then able to provide a strategy for them. Another example was a restaurant group. They were in the middle of Bradford, and they felt that they were not getting enough footfall. Although they're very close to the city center was just reopened, and there are lots of people going in and out of the city center. And they were just up where the Anglican church is, and they weren't getting enough footfall. So what they wanted was a marketing strategy based on social media to then help them to attract customers to their particular location. However, although they got that strategy, they still had financial challenges and they were not able to effectively execute the strategy because the thing was that they were working with children with learning difficulties and they were educating them, preparing them for the work environment. The process was taking much longer for them to get a student from A to B. So the whole project suffered because of that. So sometimes the issues could be quite complex. It's not just one thing. So the strategy is not often straightforward. We have to have a series of discussions, perhaps do some more research, and then come up with something that is specifically ideal for the client, where the client is financially, even perhaps the mindset, because oftentimes when I work with people, it's about the mindset. In fact, I'm doing a series every Mondays called the Entrepreneur's Edge, and it's looking at beliefs that hold us back, that keep us from achieving the things that we want to achieve.
I'm gonna ask you a follow-up question on that because I'm really interested to know. So, how can we overcome our limiting beliefs and really go after everything what we really want to do? What's your take on that? How can we do that?
Well, it's first of all, we go back to the first C. So clarity. We need to get clarity. Yeah, one needs to get clarity on what one's want. When
Okay.
one become clear on that, then everything else falls in in place. So I think clarity is key. But the other thing is being aware of how we are thinking, how we're using language. So it becomes deeper because we're looking at the nature of being. What if I want to succeed as a business person? What kind of person do I need to be? It might mean the way I am currently, how I'm thinking, my mindset wouldn't allow me to achieve the quality of success I need. So I might need to change some aspects of me. So I need to see myself as, let's suppose your strategy might be in order to promote your business, you have to do public speaking, right? But you don't like public speaking, you're shy, you're withdrawn. So you would never actually go out and do public speaking. And if the business depends on that, I mean, I don't need to tell you more.
Yeah.
Then the whole idea then one needs to see oneself as a public speaker who is comfortable going out, speaking to people, getting on stages. And then once you do that, you could spread your message.
And what if I really want to do public speaking, right? But I still have my internal monologue saying that no, I can't. I'm scared. I'm scared. I'm scared. So how can I get over that limiting belief that I can't be a good speaker?
Well, so that's where the mindset comes in. So you would have to change your mindset. So again, it's about the story you're telling yourself. So if we go back, you say you were telling yourself that you're not a good speaker. So if you reverse that and was saying, I am becoming a better speaker. But it's not just repeating affirmation, but
Taking action.
you're a
Yeah.
member of Speakers Club. So you
Mm-hmm.
go to club every week or every month. You
Mm-hmm.
learn the techniques, you learn the strategies. So by people being with people you're comfortable with, you learn the techniques, you feel more confident, and now you're eventually ready to go about. So it's a range of steps and processes that one has to walk through. But if one is not conscious about the challenge, then there is no impetus, no inclination to do anything. So we have to become aware of what some of these beliefs are. The sad thing is that we might not even be conscious about some of these beliefs.
Yeah. Because they're deep into the unconscious, right? We might not be aware about it.
Yeah, and it might go back to the to childhood, but the idea is not to go back into
Yeah.
regression analysis and look at your childhood and
Yeah.
whether your mother dropped you on your head or something like that, but to say, based on where I am now, what is it do I need? That's the clarity. And based on what you need, you might decide, well, what would help me to take the next step to go forward in that direction to achieve what it is I want to achieve.
Nice. And could you share maybe your personal journey of how did you overcome a limiting belief that has really helped you progress in your business?
Well, My limiting beliefs was when I was growing up, I used to stammer as a child.
No way.
Yes. So
I
so
can't because I seeing you at a public speaking competition, and now
yes.
like I can't imagine. Sorry, tell me.
Yes. So I used to stammer, and so I was afraid of opening my mouth. And also there were certain words I found difficult to say. So I wasn't going to say anything. But I had listened to, BBC World Service, and I've listened to some of the great speakers, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. I read about them. I even read about Churchill and all these great leaders. So although I was afraid initially, there was a bigger force behind me saying that's what I needed to do because I admire Martin Luther King. I admire Malcolm X. I admire Winston Churchill. I used to watch Houses of Parliament debate. So I've always wanted to be like that. And I think the fact that I wanted to do better, that overrode the fact that I was being, fearful, stammering. I, I mean, I never had lessons how to overcome the stammer, and I started getting involved in different activities, and it just disappeared.
Nice, nice, and you're competing in competitions now, so that's
Yes,
amazing.
yeah. So I gained the confidence, and that wasn't by sitting and wishing. I was telling myself a positive story. I was creating the narrative. I could be a good public speaker,
Yeah,
and
and
I'm going to competition. And so when I go to the competition, the last time, the competition before the one you met me at, I
yeah,
won at that competition.
yes,
That gives me the confidence, the evidence that I could do it. So the only way I could go now is up because I have evidence to back me up saying I'm a good speaker. I'm winning trophies. I could go and
yeah,
get the trophy and show it to you, but it's
yeah.
in the
No,
other room.
no, I agree, and I think another thing is that it's important that we should also have mentors that we could look up to and learn from. So I think
Yes,
that
yeah.
also plays a key role when you mentioned that Martin Luther King, and you were listening to him and you're trying to embody that. How can we speak like him? So I think that played a
Yes, yeah.
for sure. So each year, Lewis, you work with like over 500 international managers, leaders, and CEOs. So what leadership skills or qualities have you noticed in them that our listeners can start working on?
The big skill, and sometimes people are not aware of it, is the ability to listen, right? Because sometimes we are so busy thinking about what we want to say to the other person, how we could challenge their views, that we never really fully understand what they're saying. So, one of the things I have been teaching my students is how they could add to the conversation rather than challenge the other person. When I was doing my PhD, we were not very supportive of each other. We were always looking to shoot down each other's arguments. And then I realized for the people who are not as courageous, that wasn't helping them to build up their confidence. So I changed and I would say, rather than try to shoot the person down, I'll ask them a question that would help them to elaborate on something that is going to lift them up and put them in a more positive state rather than knock them down. So that's also what I do with the people I work with. I try to bring them up. About a week ago, I was working with this group of leaders, and there was one person I didn't know and nobody knew. He was really good at public speaking, but he didn't even know that himself.
Okay.
I called him up to say a couple words about himself and where he's from, and he couldn't do it. I started to interview him, start small and encourage him. Before we got to the end, he took control of the room and he was telling amazing story. He had the whole room laughing, and it was amazing because he discovered something he had within him but didn't actually realize. And that moment, it must have been about 5 minutes. He just suddenly was able to tap into that after I helped him to relax and chill out and engage. Man, that was amazing. Now every time he sees me, he wants to volunteer to do something. It's just amazing.
So Lewis, tell me, what questions did you ask him that made him so self-aware about his own potential and public speaking skills?
You see, that's the wisdom I was telling you about earlier. That I can be vulnerable, that I can listen, and I can put myself in a state to create space for people to grow. In other words, I could hold the space for them. It's not always easy to explain how it is done, but I'm there for them. And during the interaction, I make them comfortable. I help them to relax and help them to tap into their inner power by the questions I ask them, because the questions are asking them about positive things that they have done before, about their dreams, about their hopes, things they would like to do. And in that process it just unfolds like magic.
Nice, nice, Lewis. That's quite interesting. So, last question before we wrap up. So, any one life advice that you would like to share with our listeners from all entrepreneurs that could help them?
Well, from what I've said already, it's just to reiterate, clarity is key, because without clarity, we have no direction, no vision, no purpose, no mission, no passion. Because sometimes the vision, the mission, it comes from that sense of clarity. Once you have that, then you can run with it. But without clarity, we're faced with confusion, procrastination, because we don't know. It's like saying your name. When you hear your name, somebody calls your name, you jump to action. You could identify with that. It's easy for you. So listening, it's a key skill, and we need to stress that more, but also the ability to communicate. And in fact, a lot of the managers I work with, they come from oral cultures, right? Which means that they're great storytellers and orators, only that they never know. So when they spend time with me, I help to excavate that out of them. Then they begin to take control, and then they can have a life of command rather than living in default. So my aim is to empower people to release their potential, so they thrive, they flourish, they grow, and they support each other. So that's my gift to the world.
Amazing.
I think those are two key things. And the other idea might be about confidence in oneself, because oftentimes people don't believe enough in themselves, and because of that, we never venture out to do things beyond our comfort zone. So these are
100%.
probably the three things I focus on when I'm interacting with people: putting them at ease, making them feel comfortable, finding something nice about them to give them a sense of power, so they can then exalt themselves. So that's what I do.
Amazing, Lewis. I've really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us today. For our listeners, I will link Lewis's all social media handles and his link for this book in the show notes, so you can check him out. And make sure you follow the show and leave us a review, because that will help me get more interesting guests like Lewis on the show. If you're listening to this on YouTube, make sure you comment below what is your key takeaway from this episode. Thank you everyone for listening, and thank you, Lewis, once again for joining us.
You're welcome. It has been a pleasure sharing with you.
Thank you, Lewis.
Thank you.